Good evening, everyone. I call the hybrid in-person virtual meeting of the Wauwatosa School Board to order. It is 7 p.m. on Monday, November 23rd, 2020. I'm in conference room C of the Fisher Administration Building, 12121 West North Avenue, with board members participating in person and remotely via the video conferencing platform Zoom, due to active health and safety concerns associated with the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic health emergency. We will begin with a moment of silent reflection. Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Mr. Dillman? Ms. Fraley?
Here.
Mr. Meyer?
Here.
Ms. Mufeld?
Here.
Mr. Phillips?
I'm here.
Mr. Rowan?
Here.
Dr. Jessup Banger?
Here.
Ellie Caddy?
Here.
Mira Gajria? Nora Rommelfanger?
Here.
And did we hear from Mr. I didn't hear Mr. Dolman. Mr. Dolman, if you may be muted.
I don't see him in the attendee list, or this panelist.
Catch him when he comes in. Thank you. Members of the Wauwatosa School Board value the input of students, parents, staff members, and community members. The board's regularly scheduled meetings provide an opportunity for opinions and concerns to be expressed publicly. The board values all comments and will respectfully consider this input in decision-making. The board requests that individuals limit their comment on each item to 3 minutes. Following any comment, an individual board member may respond on the issue raised. However, it is not the intent of the public comment portion of the agenda for the board member to enter into a debate with a member or members of the community. Because non-agenda items are not publicly posted in advance, no action will be taken on public comment regarding non-agenda items this evening. Do we have any public comment in the room on any non-agenda items, or virtually, Jamie? Anybody? Okay.
There are no hands raised, and Mr. Doman just entered the meeting while you were speaking.
Thank you, Jamie. Seeing none, we'll move into our recognition section. School board member Sean Rowland is being recognized this evening for achieving a level 2 in the WSD member recognition program. Mr. Rowland, congratulations.
Thanks. I don't really have anything to add. It's been fun. Keep it going.
Thank you, Sean. I know you take your professional development seriously and that you've been engaged with WSB and other things for ongoing development. Kudos to you. The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda which board members would like to remove for separate discussion and action? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Mufeld. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rollin. Any board member questions or comments on the consent agenda?
I have a couple of comments. I'd like to thank Mark Picard of Photography by Picard for his generous donation of that printer, and then also Brenda Dahlquist for that donation of the saxophone, and then Brian Lehman of Craftmaster for wood supplies for our trades. So thank you, all three of you, for those generous donations to the school district. I mean, this year more than ever, those donations really go a long way, and I just really like the partnership between local business owners and local businesses in our school district. So I want to say thank you for that. Then I also want to say thank you to Melissa Netteshine for her service to the district over all these years, especially in terms of her work around the referendum projects and keeping us up to date in a timely manner. It was a lot to navigate, but I just want to thank you, Melissa, for your work with the district and wish you the best of luck.
Kudos. I am looking at Melissa and giving her a big applause. Thank you so much for everything. Your work has been fantastic. I jokingly said to Melissa sometime in maybe May or June, we sped up our referendum building projects by about a year. And I remember sitting in a session talking about that, and Melissa and Dr. Ertl saying, yep, we can make this happen. And they've still made it happen in the midst of all the pandemic planning. So you have done incredible work. You'll be missed. We'll do our best to carry on without you. All of our best wishes to you as you head off to Brown Deer.
Or Washington.
Or Washington. Or Washington. Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Mr. Doman,
Yes.
Ms. Fraley,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Ms. Muehlfeld,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger.
Yes. We are now moving into a human resources action item. Mr. Doman.
I move to authorize the superintendent to resolve the grievance as authorized in closed session.
Thank you. Any board member comment or questions on this item? Second.
I'll second it.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Rowland. Any board member questions or comments on this item? Okay. Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Mr. Doman,
Yes.
Ms. Fraley,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Ms. Muehlfeld,
Yeah.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger.
Yes, and this item passes. Mr. Rowland, you had mentioned to make a motion
Sure.
adjusting some of our agenda.
Would you like me to do that?
Uh,
Well, I can at least make the motion, and then we'll see if I do that or not. So just thinking about the folks who may be tuning in, I will make a motion to move up the medical/public health advisory committee update as well as the superintendent pandemic response update as the next item.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
Thank you, Leanne. Any board comment or questions on this item? Seeing none, Ms. Newman, can you call the roll?
Mr. Doman,
Yes.
Ms. Fraley, Mr. Meyer,
Yeah.
Ms. Muehlfeld,
Yeah.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger.
Yes. So in terms of our agenda, how this will adjust things is that we will just be sliding the medical public health advisory committee update underneath 9 superintendent reports, as well as then the superintendent pandemic response update to this point on the agenda. Everything else will slide back a little bit. So we are joined with a couple of presenters, and I believe there's a video that we've got from one of our from our team. Dr. Ertl, do you want to talk us through?
Yeah, Marta is going to introduce the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Ertl. The Medical Advisory Committee met on November 4th and 18th. We reviewed internal and external metrics, as well as we discussed the questions that were asked at the last board meeting. Dr. Nolan was not able to with us, but he recorded a presentation that we would like to share with the board and community.
Medical and Public Health Advisory Panel members. I'm an emergency medical.
Sorry, there was a bit of a glitch on my side. I'm going to restart that.
Hello, everyone. For those of you who I have not had the opportunity to meet over the past couple months or introduce myself to over the past couple months, my name is Sean Nolan. I'm one of the Medical and Public Health Advisory Panel members. I'm an emergency medicine physician in the Milwaukee area here. And I, first of all, apologize that I can't be there in person to present on Monday. I'm actually presenting this on Thursday, November 19th. And I just want to, as we go through data a little bit later in the presentation, just keep that in mind, because if we've learned anything over this pandemic, things can change very quickly at times. And so this is being recorded 4 days ahead of time. And I also apologize for the recording, but we felt very strongly that we wanted a consistent voice giving our messaging going forward. And since that wasn't available, we did it in this format. I hope to, we're definitely in unique times as far as the pandemic is concerned here in Wisconsin and Wauwatosa specifically. And I hope to, during this presentation, hopefully at least clear up, maybe not convince anybody of anything, but at least clear up the rationale that the Medical Advisory Panel has for the recommendations that we have been making and are currently making. And in this presentation, what I'm going to do is present in an SBAR format with we're going to present our situation first and then go through some background information. And then we're going to go through our assessment. And then lastly, we're going to go through the recommendations that we have currently as Medical and Public Health Advisory Panel. So the situation that we're in right now, last time we met was November 2nd with the board, and we presented to the board. And at that time, we were recommending staying in hybrid with some discussions about how we were going to move forward. And with those discussions, we were asked several questions by the board, and we've been deliberating on those questions. But during that time frame, as everyone I'm sure is well aware, we have really started to have sustained significant growth of COVID-19 disease and prevalence within our communities. And that's very evident by our metrics as well, especially in the community metrics, which are all in red currently. And so that is kind of the situation that we are in. And these are the questions that the board presented to us that we've been trying to answer to the best of our ability over the past several weeks. And the first question is, our current recommendation is hybrid, and is that still okay with our community data and the community prevalence being what it is now? Second part of that question is there actually a point where the community data itself would prompt the district to go fully virtual? And we'll answer that question later in the presentation. And then the second question is multi-part as well. And it's when we do move forward, because we will move forward at some point in time, when we do move forward with students back to 5-day in-person classroom teaching, who should come back? When should they come back? And how should they come back? And that will be the last part of our presentation, answering that question. But to give us some background that I hopefully will help explain our rationale as we go forward. When we first started this school year, we had very little data, and we only had the community data that we had available to us to make the decisions that we were making. And we've had some questions from the community as well as teachers and members of the board as far as our recommendations currently is it hybrid. And back in August, when we had a much prettier community metric card, our recommendation was the same as hybrid. And how do we reconcile those two things? One of the issues that we'll talk about is we have a lot more sources now of data. And we don't just have those initial community metrics anymore, which are caseload, trend, positive rate for testing, as well as hospital capacity. But we have this other data, which is internal school data that we have. We also have a lot of experience now with things that work within the schools, things that don't work within the schools. And with all the other, lots of other schools, we're not the only school district dealing with this. We have a lot of scientific literature out there about what best practices are and what is safe in a relative term as far as bringing our kids back to school. And by learning how to meld those two things together, those community metrics that we initially started with, and now all this new information, all this new knowledge that we have, we're trying to use those together to make these recommendations. Other parts of our background, last presentation that I had, we talked a bit about all the data sources that we were looking at in order to get our data, especially the scientific data. And as we move forward, I really want us to focus on all the other considerations that we're having. And I hope this comes across to the board as well as our community, that all of these things are what we are keeping in our minds, and not in the back of our minds, but at the forefront of our minds as we read the literature, as we talk to each other, as we have our meetings, as we talk about what our recommendations are going forward. And it really starts from the outside of the ethics, the judgment, the data, and the science. And then it starts to work its way back towards the middle. And as it works in, we consider physical well-being or safety. We consider emotional health of our students, our staff, our community. We consider the mental health of all those groups. We consider physical matters because some of that does matter. And then we start to consider our community and our parents, and that leads us into our teachers and staff, as well as some of our more vulnerable students, which are our special education students, our younger students who developmentally learn better in person. And then there's other groups of students, such as minority students that have higher risk of bad disease with COVID-19. And then we look at overarching all of our students is where our focus starts to center in on. And I just want to make sure that we get that across to the community and the board, that that's where our thought process is as we look at the data, as we give recommendations. We have this background of our community metrics that we started the year with. Now we have all this new knowledge of experience and internal metrics within our school district itself. And we have all these other considerations that we're taking into account from the community and from the literature as well. And that leads us into our assessment, like how are we gonna, that's our background and our questions that we have. And so what are we actually looking at to make these decisions? And this is one of the harder slides to look at as a physician who is a frontline healthcare worker. We definitely feel how red this slide is. And this is our community metrics. And I'm hoping everybody's seen these before, and so I won't spend a lot of time on this at all. But we're in a bad spot as a community right now as far as how rapidly progressive COVID-19 is in its prevalence in our community. And how naive were we when we started? We had this, and it's a relatively conservative number, but still the more aggressive numbers from like the CDC, their number for high risk caseload over a 14-day period is greater than 300 cases per 100,000. And we are at, as of November 16th, we were at 1,338 cases per 100,000. And it just shows how naive we were as a scientific community, basing all of these numbers off of models. I don't know if anybody expected us ever to get to these points. Over the past several weeks, our testing, our positive rate, we watched it slowly creep up, and then it just took off over the last 2 weeks to a point where we're at 14% now. Hospital capacity, which once again, I just want to, we've had some questions from the community about this. This is COVID admissions to the hospital. What percentage of hospitalized patients are COVID patients, COVID positive patients? And so hospital capacity is kind of it's a rough estimate for hospital capacity. There's other ways to look at hospital capacity, but this is what we settled on. And that has grown steadily as any of our inpatient nurses in the community or folks with family members in the hospital or providers that might be listening to the call fully know very well that our hospitals are definitely filling up. And our trend has been increasing and has been increasing for some time. And so all of these metrics scream like, stop. But that's not all the data that we have. We have a lot of other data now. And so back in August, if we started school with this report card, we would have likely started in virtual. But we had a very different report card than this back in August. And so the question, which I hopefully will answer, or at least give an understanding rationale for over the next little bit here, is how we can consider staying where we are, or even have these conversations about moving forward when we are in a situation with community data that looks like this. So the next part that we have, the next data piece that we have, is we can start looking at our internal data, and this is available on the website. And I highly recommend going look at it. The same data is available to the community and the board as it is to the Medical Public Health Advisory Panel. I'm just going to pull out a couple pieces of this data that we have found very interesting. And this is our students, this is cumulative data since the beginning of the year of positive COVID cases. And so throughout the district, we have had 155 students test positive that we know of. And all this data might be a little skewed because we don't require testing. We don't require people to furnish test results to us as a district as well. And so we need to look at it through that lens. It's likely a somewhat higher number than that 155. The big thing that we talked about last time we spoke was the scientific literature showing that elementary school students likely have a lower risk of severe COVID-19 disease, or moderate or severe COVID-19 disease, as well as they have a decreased risk of susceptibility of catching the disease and infectivity of giving other people the disease when they have it. And a lot of the literature did not match what we initially saw. So this is broken down by, this is pre-K through second grade, third through fifth grade here, which would be our younger, less than 10-year-old cohort of students. And then this is our middle school and high school students. And as you can see right now, we have about a doubling of the numbers in the older kids, which is pretty on par with what the worldwide and national scientific literature has shown. We did not have that initially. When we first talked last week, or not last week, I apologize, 2 weeks ago, regarding this, we actually had similar numbers between our middle school, high school kids and our elementary school kids. And so it was a 50-50 breakdown, which gave us pause. And this shift has happened very, very recently. But it's something we're going to keep in mind as we go on and look at our recommendations. These are our students as well, and this is broken down. This is once again cumulative data of positive cases, and it's broken down by school. In this, what we really learned from this is it is a school problem at times. It is not a district problem at times. And so almost all of our cases here, we have a whole total of 155, and almost all of them, a large bulk of them, come from 5 different schools that we have, mainly the older with middle school and high school students buildings. And so that's just something to keep in mind when we talk about ways to combat this high community prevalence leaking into our schools later on when we talk about our recommendations, is just to keep in mind that this is, it appears to be, at least in our district, and it holds true in other districts as well, to be a school problem and not necessarily a district problem. This is when we look at staff, we see the same thing as far as schools are concerned too. And this is cumulative data of our staff that is broken down over the past, since the positive cases since September 30th. We have 72 positives with our staff so far. And it's once again broken down between really 4 schools is where we've seen it. And so there's little pockets of where people will get the disease and pass the disease around. And I just want to point out that these aren't cases that are within the school themselves. These are mostly cases that are coming from the community and not within the school. And we know that because as we look at our quarantines, which is probably a bigger problem for us than our positive cases are, we have in total now quarantined 609 students and 57 staff members. And they're getting quarantined because they had a close contact within the school itself. And so it was a teacher who had a student who came back positive, or vice versa. There was a student who had a teacher who came back positive. And we felt that they, by our guidelines, had close contact, which is more than 15 minutes within 6 feet over the 24-hour period. And with that, therefore, the student or the staff got placed under quarantine. Of those, and once again, we'll look at it through the lens that we do not require testing. And so these numbers are slightly underestimated, most likely. It's hard to know how much underestimated they are, but they are slightly underestimated. The positive rate out of these quarantines is very, very small. For students, it's less than 1% of those will become positive. For staff, it's well less than 10%, which is holds true to what we talked about before with what the scientific literature shows, that the students are less susceptible. And so we would suspect that we have less from those quarantines on the students. We would expect to have less students become positive than the staff. And this seems to be holding true. And once again, this is part of our assessment, and this is stuff that we did not have back in August. None of this information did we have back in August. And so we're trying to meld all that community data that we had and is worsening with all of this new data that we've been gathering over the past 3 months that we've been in school, and looking at that, because all of this internal data is actually fairly positive. I think most of us from the medical health, public health advisory panel have been a bit surprised at how little leakage there has been of community cases into the school. And we're not surprised because we didn't expect to see a lot of in-school transmission. And we don't have zero in-school transmission, but we have very low levels of in-school transmission, which we find very hopeful as we move forward, even in these hard times with the community being on fire the way that it is. Then as we continue to assess these things, we don't just have the data, we have experience, and we have our community, and we have our teachers, and we have our students, and we have our district as well, which are all learning at the same time. And we've been asking and getting great feedback from all of those different avenues. And we have all of these different groups of people who have different stressors, different wants, and different desires going forward as far as the school year is concerned. And we're trying to meld all of those together as well, or at least take those all into consideration. And from families, we've heard, I mean, it's incredibly stressful as a parent as well, who has children in school. It can be trying to get my middle school kid to get his asynchronous work in, not on time, but like correctly, like downloaded correctly, is always an adventure. And he's a relatively like good kid at school, you know. And so I can't imagine how hard it is with younger kids doing this at home at all. And it's got to be incredibly stressful. And childcare issues that this brings up, and then trust issues that parents and families have between the school and in the house and the district, and our recommendations, and all of those things come out for sure. And on an operations level, we're learning a lot about group size. We're learning a lot about our staff's resiliency and our staff's concerns, and our staff's anxieties, and our staff's triumphs, and all of those things. And then a lot of the things that we're learning about safety as things go along. From the students, the biggest thing that we keep hearing is wanting to learn, and then the stress. The safety is definitely a lower factor when we talk to the students, but it's definitely a higher factor, at least in our minds. Trying to convince a high school kid that they're not invincible is difficult to do at times. And then from our staff, we're hearing a lot of it's stressful, and we hear that, and we understand that, and we hear that there are safety concerns. And one part of our hope is, as we look at all of these things again and make this assessment of our community data, our internal data, and all of this other experience that we have from our community and our staff, that we can hopefully not get rid of it. I don't think we're going to get rid of anybody's anxiety or stress, but hopefully we can lessen it to a point where it's understandable, and we're able to move forward together. So back to our questions. because I think that's our assessment of what is going on around us right now. And now we're going to start answering these questions, and we'll start with the first one, then we'll get into the second one. But I just wanted to remind everybody of the questions that we're really trying to get at and answer. And that first one is where our current recommendation is hybrid, and we're getting some feedback from the community like, Dr. Nolan, how can we possibly stay in a hybrid if like the world is falling apart around us? And like, is there a point where we're just gonna pull the plug because a certain number gets so high? And that's the first question that we'll get into here. And so our rationale, we're also on the other end, we are still getting some community feedback that we want to keep moving forward and we want to move forward faster. And we're hesitant to do that because we're concerned that moving too fast would be disastrous for us. Not disastrous might be a strong term, but it would set us up for failure. And we don't feel that that's the right move for us to make right now. So we would not recommend going forward with bringing any more students back in larger numbers or in more quantity as far as days are concerned until our community prevalence calms down. And we'll talk about what we exactly mean about that. And our big concern is with this giant community burden that we have, we're not having, like I talked about with our internal metrics, we're not seeing a lot of internal transmission of the virus at all within the school. The school seems like a very safe place. And we'll talk about why in a little bit. But most of the cases that are coming in from the community. And so far we've been able to shield that somewhat with our mitigation strategies and with our smaller class sizes being part of our mitigation strategies. But our concern is with this giant community burden that we have, if we open everything up right now, what would happen is our community would just start to overwhelm. It would overwhelm our layered mitigation. And then we would have significant exposures throughout the school, and that would bleed in. It would either increase our illness within the school, or the bigger problem that we have often within a school is quarantines that folks would go in on. And that would very quickly shut us down from a staff perspective as well as from a student perspective. And we've been able to be very consistent so far, and we feel that that's been beneficial to our students, especially with staying in hybrid. We haven't had to bounce back and forth a lot from virtual to hybrid for those folks who are in phase into learning throughout the last 3 months. And we feel that that's been a bit of a win so far for the district. And like I said before, I think right now the idea of going forward before our community starts to calm down a little bit, really the potential for failure outweighs any potential for success that we might have. So that doesn't really answer the question of why it's okay to stay in hybrid. And so we're going to continue to get to that. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about, is there ever a level that the panel, the medical health, the medical public health advisory panel would ever recommend going virtual? And there is no specific level of community prevalence alone that would dictate us moving fully to virtual environment for hybrid or in-person learning. And we consider this an operational or a school-based decision. And it goes back to what we showed in the internal metrics before on how almost all of the cases that we have are within certain schools. And that's why it becomes a school-based decision. And our illness within our schools is actually a fairly low level. The quarantines becomes a big issue. And I know for our teachers, it becomes a big issue because that's your staffing. And then you get folks get asked to cover other classes and they lose their work periods, and it sounds awful. And once we hit levels of that, then it becomes unsustainable for us to be able to offer that in-person learning. But that's an operational decision. There is no number like hitting 1,500 cases per 100,000 for our caseload that would make us say that we need to stop and go fully virtual. This is always an ongoing decision. It can change day by day. It could change by the time you guys are listening to all of this 4 days from now. We could be virtual because of an operational decision. And so we need a certain flexibility from our staff and from ourselves and from our students and from our community as we move forward, because this is always an ongoing decision. So let's talk a little bit more about why we feel that we can stay in virtual even with a very high-risk community going on. I think everyone's big fear is that this high-risk community that we're in, this all red scorecard with a caseload of 1,300 per 100,000 is going to just completely overwhelm our prevalence within our school. And we're going to have cases after cases after cases and illness after illness after illness within our school. And we have not seen that yet. We are always watching for it, but we have not seen that yet. And so the question is, why? Why haven't we seen that at all? And there's two main factors that are probably playing into why we don't see it, and why we do still consider that in-person school to be a safe place. And the first one is our layered mitigation. I know we throw out that word all the time. And I thought about it a lot the other day, yesterday actually, when I was driving home from work, and I am an ER doc, seeing a lot of COVID at work. And I was driving home thinking about this, like, what is it different about work when I go to work and put on my mask? I wear it differently, I think, than I do when I'm out in the community. And it's because I do it intentionally. I have an intention when I'm at work seeing COVID patients. I never touch my face. I always wear my mask. I wash my hands constantly. I'm always very intentional, and I don't even think about it anymore. It's all like this second, just like back of the brain memories that I have that are just subconsciously coming out all the time. But this intentional mitigation that I have while I'm at work keeps me probably safer while I'm at work than when I go home and out into the community and wear my mask kind of sparingly, or my mask isn't fitting just right, and things along those lines. And it's that intentionality that really makes our layered mitigation work well. And our kids have it when they go to school. And I think our teachers have it as well when they go to school and go to work. That they have this intentionality of, I'm protecting myself while I'm there. And we do such a good job of it that it helps prevent this giant community burden from getting into our school. And the other thing that seems to be holding true, thankfully, is that there are these childhood factors that we talked about with the lower infectivity for children, especially younger children, as well as the lower susceptibility for the children and the lower morbidity that children have when they do get infected. And those two things, when you get them together, which we have in our schools, kind of shuts down this pathway between that high-risk community and our in-school prevalence blowing up. And because of that fact that we're able to cut this off, we feel that it's still sustainable to stay in a hybrid model currently, even with our community being so high risk. Because it's going to be, we're trying to avoid using the word safe at all. It's going to be a matter of risk benefit. It's going to be a matter of suitability. And we still think it's sustainable to remain in that hybrid phase as long as through quarantines we have staff and we have students and we are keeping a close eye on our illness within our schools as well. And again, just to reiterate, there's no specific level of community prevalence alone that would dictate us moving to fully virtual from the point of view of the Medical and Public Health Advisory Board. And to just reiterate it once again, I think it's hard for us to wrap our heads around the whole idea of how crazy our community is right now, and how overwhelmed our community is right now, and how we still feel that our school environment is still a protected environment. And it really comes down to that, the layered mitigation, the intentional mitigation that we have leads to that lower school prevalence, and that shields us from that community burden. And then it works vice versa as well. And as we are shielded within the classroom, it stops us from affecting that community burden. It doesn't appear that our school is not making our community worse. And so if we shut down our schools, and if the schools to begin with are not making our community worse, and we shut down our schools and go virtual, it doesn't necessarily help our community. Our community has to do its own thing in order to get that community prevalence down, because they seem to work on separate levels. And also, once again, this is not all just data driven whatsoever. And we've gotten all this experience and we've gotten all this feedback from the community and our staff as well. In the hybrid format and that consistent in-person learning and feedback and the social engagement and that normalcy, it's hard to replicate in all virtual modes. This is kind of comes into our emotional health and our mental health of our students specifically. We feel that benefit outweighs the risk. And as we learn more, and we will continue to learn more, we don't know, I'm not sure what we'll know a couple months from now, but we'll know more. In the beginning, back in March, April, all these lockdowns of very large segments of our society made sense because we didn't know exactly what was going to happen and how the virus was going to behave. And we have a decent base of literature now that allows us to not use just a blunt tool, but use more of a focused tool in order to mitigate this community spread and mitigate any kind of spread we might have within schools. So I think we need to rely on that as well as we go forward. So that's our answer to that first question. And the recommendation is it still okay given the community data? And we feel that yes, it is still not just sustainable, but relatively safe and possibly safer within the school than out in the community as far as our hybrid model is concerned. And there is no specific community data point that would prompt the medical advisory board to ask the district to go fully virtual. And so we're going to move on to the second question here. And the second question is when we move forward, because we will move forward. And it's hard we have to, I think as a panel, we have to keep reminding ourselves that yes, the world is on fire right now with COVID around us, but it won't be forever. And at some point in time, we're going to have to move forward. And so we have to almost look at it as the community metrics are not as bad as they are, and how will we move forward when we actually get to that point. And we talked about this a lot the last time we presented to the board, but we had some specifics that we were asked to kind of flush out just a little bit. So when is it suitable to consider moving to 5-day in-person instruction? And the advisory panel recommends the following 2 criteria. And we talked about these a little bit prior, but we're going to flush them out just a little bit for the board as well as for the community. We do need a decrease in community prevalence for 2 weeks, which would be our trend line is going down for at least 2 weeks in a row. And we feel that we need to be at least in orange on our district gradient. And once both those are met, we recommended bringing elementary students back first. And we'll get to what we mean by elementary students after we answer the question of what we mean by orange. So what do we mean by orange? When we look at our community gradient up at the top, this is our current community gradient, which is all the way over on this side. And if it could possibly go over here, we would probably be over there somewhere. But we feel that given that everything we know about the transmission and the within our schools, as well as the infectivity with younger kids and the susceptibility of younger kids, that we can move forward. We don't need to be all the way over here in order to start moving forward again. So this isn't going to go from red to green right away, and it's going to kind of creep down. And it's hard to say how long it'll take to get all the way down to the green side. And we feel it would be a disservice to wait and to bring students back until we're down on the green side. So at some point in time in here, we feel it's going to be okay. And so we didn't have a solid definition for what that meant, but now I think we do. And so I want to explain what we mean by orange, and it would be in this relative area here that we feel it would be safe to start bringing some elementary school kids back. There's a couple things that we know on this scorecard of how it's going to behave. Well, I shouldn't say no. There's a couple of relatively safe assumptions and then assumptions that are like anyone's guess. A relatively safe assumption is that this community data, the caseload, is going to remain in red for a very, very long time. We are up at 1,300 for this right now. We have, for the entire school year so far, we've only been below 200 for three of those weeks, I believe it was. And there are some arguments to be made that our number is very conservative. I think to get into that argument kind of misses the point of us being at 1,300 over here. This is going to remain in red. We can be safe that this is going to remain in red. This, by definition of us being able to come back and bring students back into school, needs to be in green. And so these two, we know these are fairly safe assumptions that these will be in these two spots. In order to be in orange, what we want is for one of these to be yellow and one of these to possibly even be in red. And the one that we need to be in yellow, that we feel needs to be in yellow, is the % positive rate. The hospital capacity, we feel okay with it being at either yellow or red. Hospital capacity, the length of stay of hospitalizations for COVID is fairly long compared to other disease states. And so the hospital capacity, just like it lags going up as our cases rise, it's also going to lag coming down. And so as long as these are on the way down, as long as everything up here is on its way down, this will make its way down too. We feel very comfortable saying that this will make its way down. So even if the hospital capacity is still in a red area, as long as we are decreasing and stable here, and we get our positive rate below 10%, we feel that would be an appropriate time and a suitable time to discuss bringing elementary students back into the schools. And so that's what we mean by orange. So once again, we're pretty confident this is going to stay in red for a very, very long time. This, by definition, needs to be in green. We want the positive rate to be in yellow, and we're not really, it would be nice if if the hospital capacity was in yellow as well, but we feel that the hospital capacity might lag a bit, even when by this criteria up here, it's relatively safe to bring or suitable, I should say, to bring our elementary students back in. So we are okay if this is still in red, as long as these have that pattern of a decreasing burden within the community. So that answers the question as to when we feel it would be safe to bring the students back. As far as who to bring back, we feel that we can give two options to the board to decide between. And one is, and all of it, like all of this is, there's risk benefit to all of these different decisions that we make. And so these two options, the first option is the first one that we presented to the board last time we met, and that was to bring K4 through second grade students back first, and then gradually after that, bring our third through fifth grade students back. The other option is to bring all elementary students back at the same time. As a side note, this does include special education students within those grades as well. And so once our metrics are in orange and our internal metrics stay suitable, that would mean, it's possible that we could be in orange as a community, but every single community case is coming from our school. And if that's the case, then we wouldn't move forward. So our internal metrics need to remain suitable still as well. These are the two options that we have going forward. And I'm going to give risks and benefits of those for the board to discuss and decide upon. So this is option one. Once again, this would be bringing K4 through second grade students back in first. And kind of the risk benefit arguments for choosing this option is, like I said before earlier on when we were going over the internal data, initially we had a 50-50 split between our elementary and our middle and high school students as far as cases in the district were. This is no longer holding true, and we are following more of the pattern that has been documented in the scientific literature, where there is much higher burden within the middle and high school students. But it gave us pause. It definitely gave us pause. We didn't have an answer for it as to why we were split 50-50 initially. And so that definitely made us hesitate and rethink this just a little bit. The other thing is that data is only one part of this equation. There is definitely a multifaceted equation. and a smaller school population allows us to let our buildings and our staff and our parents adjust a little bit easier with less students in the building itself. And it also allows us to keep as many layers of mitigation in place at the same time while we learn some best practices from our teachers that we rely on so heavily. And these things are available when we do it with a smaller group of kids coming back into the school. And it's not a smaller group of kids within one classroom, because we're talking about bringing back K4 through second all at once. So those classrooms will have more students in them per area, but the building itself won't. And so those other times of passing periods and things of that nature, we have a time to learn a little bit and time to adjust a little bit. We would also, as we'll talk about in the next option, we would recommend a 2-week period between the two, and it gives us 2 more weeks of getting internal data as well as community data once we make this step forward with the K4 through second grade students. And again, most importantly, it gives us time to learn about our successes and failures, a little bit more time than if we brought a bigger cohort of students back into the school at the same time. Option 2 is bringing K4 through 5th grade, all the elementary kids school kids back in at the same time. And this is, I mean, it's more consistent with the literature. It was brought up last meeting that if all the literature has a break off of less than 10-year-olds, that kind of equals a 5th grader. Why would we even recommend the K4 through 2 to come back first? And so this option would be more consistent with that literature. But like we talked about before, literature is not data is not the only piece of the puzzle here. And bringing larger school populations in at the same time gives us less time to learn how to maximize the mitigation factors that we will lose some of. And the main thing that we lose when we bring more students back in to the school at one time, the main thing that we lose, obviously, is some of that physical distancing that has been so beneficial to us. Also, there's less room for failure once we bring a bigger population back in. But there are definitely benefits to it. First benefit was it's more consistent with the literature out there. Second is it might be less of a burden on our families, especially those with, I know when we had young kids, we had all our young kids all at the same time. And so they were all like in elementary school. And I know there's a lot of families out there that have kids who are in, they have a 1st grader and a 5th grader. And bringing back just the K4 through 2 kids at first is another burden on that family. And we hear that for sure from those families. And the most important thing about this option is that more students get into that classroom experience sooner with this option. And like I said before, what we would recommend between the two, like how do we know when to go forward? We would give a 2-week period between if the board chooses option number 1, we would have a 2-week period between option number 1 and bringing the 3rd through 5th graders back in. And during that time, collecting that internal data to make sure that we're not having a wildfire within our schools at all. As far as secondary is concerned, and this wasn't specifically asked, but I think we owe it to the community to at least start having these discussions. There's secondary and middle school kids, or I should say high school and middle school kids, is a little tougher to deal with because they really act like adults when it comes to COVID-19 transmission. They don't act like older adults when it comes to morbidity, thank goodness. But as far as transmission is concerned, they definitely do. So it's a little bit harder to know how we're going to deal with bringing those students back into the schools. Given that our group is kind of postponed, or we're having ongoing discussions, but we don't have solid recommendations. But knowing that we'll at some point in time bring these elementary students back into the school first, and then we have a lot of experience with them and things that worked when we bring more students back in, that'll help us really frame that discussion as far as bringing back the middle school and high school students. So we wanted to give the community and maybe our teachers an idea of what we think this is going to look like for the 2021 year school year. And this is really, I can't underemphasize that this is a prediction. We have no idea what's going to happen. I don't think any of us thought that, I think we all knew a second wave was coming in the fall or winter at some point in time. I don't think any of us, it was hard to predict that it was coming as early as it did. And it was hard to predict that it was going to get as bad as it did as well. And so these are just predictions. Given our community metrics currently and what we're proposing going forward as far as what the community metrics would need to be in order to bring students back in for 5-day in person, we're not looking at December of this year at all. We're probably looking at January at the earliest of 2021 of bringing any students back into school, and those would be elementary students. That being said, these are all just predictions. If magically we started doing a great job as a community, getting that community burden down, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, then we would be ready to pull that trigger of bringing elementary school kids back in. But as things are looking right now, it doesn't look like before January is going to be on the table at all. And barring any dramatic changes in the literature or our community prevalence or any large-scale vaccination campaigns, the likelihood of middle school and high school kids going back to 5-day in person, it really remains uncertain. It's something that's on our radar and we're thinking about all the time, but it's hard to put any kind of numbers or idea of when that's actually going to happen. And we just want to remind everyone that right now the default model for phase into learning is hybrid, and our big hope is to get elementary grades, the elementary grades back into school as soon as is suitable, and that likely won't happen until January. But it could happen sooner if I would love to think that it happens sooner, because that would mean that our community prevalence is dramatically improved. And then people are safe out there and there's less illness and less folks in the hospital and everything. I think that would be awesome. But realistically, we're probably looking at January. The last thing that we wanted to talk about with everyone is how we can be successful at this going forward. It's stressful, all of it. It's incredibly stressful. It's stressful at work, stressful at home. It's stressful out in the community. It's like pervasive stressful too. And so we want to be successful at this, and we think we can be. We think we have a strong enough community that we can be successful at this. And I think this is the way that we can do that moving forward. And it all starts with communication down at the bottom of the foundation of all of this. And we're going to do the best that we can as a medical public health advisory panel to be excellent communicators of what our thoughts are, what our rationale is. I think if we do that, hopefully we can bring comfort to those folks that have concerns and anxieties about the decisions that we're making. And so we strive to be excellent at that communication. And we ask that the district and our teachers and our board and our community does the same thing. And it's not all about communication like giving a presentation like this to the board, but it's about communication between your neighbors and other parents at school and your colleagues at school. And that communication is it's what we build all of this off of. The other thing that we need to look for is that collective knowledge that we're all building. And it's not just the scientists and the data scientists and the public health advisors, it's our teachers at school who are actually doing all this work, and our parents at home who are trying to manage everything that they're managed, and sharing all that knowledge with us as a community so that we can make these decisions going forward. But what's good for one person is not always good for every single person. And so we need to be flexible with each other. And with that comes patience. We need to be patient with each other as we go forward, especially during these really hard, stressful times with our community prevalence being so high. And that really helps to relieve that anxiety and relieve some of that stress, because it can get into such a cycle that it's hard to get out of. The mitigation, and this is my mitigation at work, like I talked about at work, like I'm a machine with my mitigation, my mask and everything. And I go home and I'm a mask wearer for sure. But I know I'm not as rigid about it when I'm at home. Like when I'm at home, I touch my face, I realize I do it. But when I'm at work, I'm intentional about it. I think we need to be that as a community. We need to be intentional about our mitigation, and our mitigation as a community is staying out of big groups, wearing masks, washing our hands, staying home when you're sick, being honest with contact tracers when they call you, doing all of these things that we can do as a community. Like every single one of us can do all of these things. It's not just our teachers in school that we're talking about with later mitigation, it's everybody in the community as well. And then really checking in with each other. Like I've said several times, it's stressful, it's anxiety provoking for sure. And just checking in with each other, making sure we're all okay. And part of that, if we are flexible and patient with each other, goes a long way to everybody's mental and emotional health. But also just checking in and listening to other people's struggles and their trials, and just having a focus on it as well, and looking out for the most vulnerable in our populations all the time is incredibly important also. But that's what I'm going to leave you guys with. I appreciate the opportunity to talk, and I'm going to take this. I love that I don't have to answer questions, and you can ask the rest of the panel all the questions that you need to. But I appreciate all of your time. Thank you.
So to follow up on his presentation, I think he stated a lot of the reasons of why. I think everybody that's on the call right now knows that we have shifted for 5 instructional days to virtual. And I think the reasons he talked about, and he even said that by the time that presentation plays, that we may be shifted into virtual. It is a short-term shift, and when we shift short-term, whether it's one school or the whole district, we stay in the hybrid. We're not making changes to A and B cohort. So that keeps those numbers of days even through December. We believe we'll see less in quarantine over this period. I think it's 17 days that we'll not have staff and students in the building for the most part. And really it comes down to our ability to be able to staff our schools. And that's the challenge that led us to this point. I think Dr. Nolan just said a lot of the things that I wanted to share too. I think it's important that our community understands that they need to do the things he's saying and make good decisions. If we want to have school and we want to get back to 5 days a week, we need more people to be making more good decisions on how they interact with virus and people that have it, and the quarantining and so on. The quarantining is really hurting us as a school as a school district, and the number of people in quarantine. So that's just the basic update, but I think Dr. Nolan did a good job presenting the rationale and what they're recommending as well.
Okay. Any other comments from other members of the medical public health advisory panel with us tonight? Or if not, we can head into board comments and questions. Seeing none, let's head into board comments and questions.
Eric, if I could just make one point as a member of both the committee and the board, and I think this is what Phil is saying too, I just want to reiterate it.
Yeah, certainly. Oh, he wasn't pausing, he was freezing. While we wait for Mr. Doman to return, any other board comment or questions? Mr. Meyer.
Mr. Meyer, I think you're on mute.
Okay, am I off mute?
Yes.
Okay. First, a couple of really, really big thank yous to the medical panel for all this outstanding work they've done. Second thank you is to the community and to our staff for successful implementation and adherence to the mitigation activities. There are stories out there in the United States of school districts who are not doing as well as us because they haven't followed the type of mitigation steps that we have taken. And so we've helped ourselves a lot. So my my question is that we know there's a lot of really good news about vaccines soon to be available. And there will be a sequence or a series of priority populations in some order that will have the vaccine first and some later, and that, of course, is very appropriate. My question is, do we as a district or a community have any ability to suggest that whoever's making those sequencing or priority decisions for vaccinations, that K-12 schools be considered as far as the teaching staff? I don't know where our teachers would fit in and our building administrators, but I would strongly say that we should be in the discussion about putting us somewhere in the series. Obviously after healthcare providers and all those, a lot of other people would come ahead of us. But as far as our community need for us to work with young people, that somehow our teachers be all over the country, the teachers be somehow in the decision making, not teachers making the decision, but whoever's making the decision about who gets the vaccine when, that teaching communities be considered.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. That's something I can certainly talk with particularly Ms. Fraley and Mr. Rolland in our legislative advocacy conversations. We meet in our district leadership team and certainly find ways to advocate for that.
Yeah, and please, I'm not arguing that we have any place, ahead of anybody or behind anybody. I'm only asking that the wise people who are making these decisions, that we be in the process and that we be explicitly placed somewhere in whatever manner is fitting according to their prioritization process.
Thank you. Mr. Doman, you're back with us.
Yes, we'll try this again. I just wanted to say that this was maybe discussed while I dropped off, but that the decision to go virtual wasn't in conflict with what the medical advisory panel asked us to do or said to stay hybrid. But the medical advisory panel has always said that operationally, if we need to go virtual, they're in support of that. And certainly if any of them are on the call and want to say otherwise, please do. But I think that's the case. So the idea to go virtual was not in conflict with what the medical advisory panel was saying in terms of staying hybrid. Their recommendation is always from a medical standpoint and what is okay. But operationally, if we can't make it work, I believe they're in full support of the decision.
Thank you, Mr. Doman. Any other board comment or questions?
I have a question for the medical panel, maybe Mr. Doman. Did the committee discuss the issue of what other school districts have done for mitigation while they're in person? I think that was another question that the board had. And that was one of their action items.
I believe we've reached out to try to get some information, but I don't know if that information has readily come back to us in any way that's useful. Phil, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you were sort of heading up getting some of that information, but I think it's hard to come by and hard to use. I don't know if it's as clear as we hoped it would be, but certainly tell me if I'm missing that.
No, it's not clear, and I think the feedback that I have is through a lot of discussions with neighboring superintendents and superintendents of Southeast Wisconsin. We did put out a request for information from every school district in the state and received response from one rural school district in northern Wisconsin. The reality is people are busy. They're not willing to take the time to share their data. People aren't finding value in putting that together. So there's not a great way to gather all the data. There's no central warehousing across the state. So we have information from other school districts and how they're operating and what they're doing, certainly.
Yeah, Thank you. I really appreciated the report this evening. I thought it was quite thorough from what we requested at our last meeting, and I am looking forward to hearing the community comments.
Any other board questions or comments on this item?
Yeah, I've got a couple, if that's okay.
Sure.
Great, thank you. I guess the question I've got, and I don't know if we're ready to talk about this today, but I guess if the question about going from K4 to second grade or K4 to fifth grade, it sounds like kind of hinges on, can we ensure operational excellence on day one? So I don't know if anybody is prepared, whether it be a building principal or for the leadership in the district office. Do we feel confident in our ability to have that kind of like operational excellence on day one to roll out a K4 through fifth grade switch? Or do we feel like maybe we wouldn't be ready and the more prudent thing to do would be the other? It's difficult for me to know because I don't know. If anybody else can shed light on that.
So we've been having a lot of discussions about that. I think there's more challenges with going K4 to 2 than going all elementary. When we split the elementary schools, that creates some challenges. Obviously, I think we could make it work, but we still have a lot more conversations that we need to have to really look at what that looks like in each of our elementary buildings and how it would play out. But there's, just from face value of whether you're doing half the students and half the grade levels and splitting with specials and all those things that play into it, I think there's some bigger challenges with JK through 2 than JK through 4 or 5, I mean.
Okay, that's interesting. Good to know. Yeah, if we can get more on that, I think that would be helpful to help us come to a decision. And I think the other thing I've got a question about is, it sounds like, maybe a projected date for this to move based on what we know today, and we know that could shift. Or I guess what we knew 4 days ago was maybe sometime in January might be a time when we could kick the tires on this, and maybe we'd be in that orange level to roll this out. So I guess operationally, are we set with all the technology and professional development needed to make that switch? Would we feel confident from an educational standpoint to roll this out, do you think?
I mean, I think so. I think it's moving us back to what we do best, 5 days a week with kids. So I wouldn't say it'd be seamless because there's going to be challenges with all the mitigation factors. But yeah, so that part's gonna play into it. That's probably going to be the biggest challenge that we have, is the shift with more students in a school, and what does that look like, and making sure we're doubling down on those mitigation efforts and continuing to do what we can to make sure we can keep school going. I think it's one of those deals we're not going to know until we get into it for some aspects of it, and we just got to prepare for everything that could happen.
Okay, but I guess from like a technology, maybe one at a time, like from a technology standpoint, would we be ready?
Yes.
Okay. So it's really more just professional development and organization of the building to maintain mitigation.
Right.
Okay. Okay. I know at one of the previous meetings, somebody had asked the question if there would be any accommodations made for students with special needs. I think that was actually a question that was during the medical panel discussion, and I think, Dr. you're going to check into that. I don't know if you've heard anything additional there.
Is he talking to me?
The question was about
Yeah. Oh, okay. I didn't know if you were addressing me.
Yeah, like with K-12, students with special needs, would they go back sooner than like all K-12? Or I know that's been discussed a number of times, but it sounds like the answer has been no, at least as far as I've heard. So I don't know if we've had an update since then.
It wouldn't be with all students, so we've added some additional students that are coming back. I should probably have Mrs. Bowers talk more about it, but we've increased the numbers that are with us more time through special education based on their IEPs. But I know with the medical advisory group, there was discussion about making sure the wording was included to include our special education students when we come back 5 days a week, but that's a given. There's the way special education occurs. And I think for some of our students that have significant challenges, we're working to find ways to, ultimately just meet their IEP and above and beyond. So it's, I don't know that it'll be anything to stand in the way of us moving in that direction.
Got it. But just so I totally understand, so if there was let's say we move back K through 5, and there's a student in 8th grade with special needs, that student would still be on a hybrid schedule and not a 5-day schedule. Is that right?
Correct.
So I guess the question was, I think that was the conversation of, is there any way to accommodate something like that? And maybe just the answer is no, and that's okay. But I just want to make sure that we just are definitively answering that and have reason.
Yeah, the answer is not a definite no. It's individual students with,
okay.
Take a look and identify their needs. And if we can accomplish it and it's part of their IEP and they need it, we'll find a way to do that.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, and I guess just the last thing I've got is, a lot of the feedback we've heard from community members on the push for 5 days a week, which makes sense. It's just that the claim is that there is a similarly low yield of spread in the schools that go 5 days a week relative to schools like ours that are hybrid. But it's just difficult, it sounds like, for us to verify those claims without the data from schools that are going 5 days a week, just to double check those claims and make sure that it's all copacetic. Is there anything that the board or community members can be doing to reach out to school districts that are going 5 days a week to say, send your data to Dr. Ertl? We're trying to get this figured out. And the board is trying to get it figured out too, right? We want to be able to vet that claim, but it's difficult. It's one thing to read a Washington Post article and say nationally that it's okay. It's another thing to say in Milwaukee County that has a similar spread going on, a similar school district has similar data, but they're 5 days a week. That's a really controlled experiment. So I guess how can we be helpful in the path to get more data?
If you can get WASB to collect it through, that might be helpful. And part of the reality is there is no certainty to whether or not there's spread in the school. And I think Caitlin would talk about the difference between pertussis. You can actually track that and be very clear of where it gets spread. In schools, there's not certainty. So whether or not there's actually spread, I think we can assume based on the data that we do have that it's limited in schools. I think we know that. But as far as really trying to definitively say yes or no, like I said, I've been in weekly conversations with about 10 other superintendents, and it's the same situation in every school district that I've talked with. Every superintendent that I talk with, they're dealing with the same issues. And whether they're in 5 days a week, I don't know of a school district that was going 5 days a week that has all their schools still 5 days a week right now. Either an individual school is shut down, or as a district, they've taken a pause, or whatever it might be. But they're going to have, their data is going to look about double what ours does. They're going to have twice as many quarantines, twice as many kids out on quarantine. That's through the conversations that I had. I don't have data sitting in front of me. We're still trying to get that and be able to share it amongst our Southeast Wisconsin group. So we're working on it.
Okay, so we actually think that maybe those claims aren't correct, that there isn't a similar rate of spread in the 5 days a week school.
I can find any school. I mean, I think you can find data that would match up with our district. I think you can find data that would tell you that certain schools are operating there's a lot of beliefs and theories out there about other districts. There's a lot of information that says, why can't we be like this district? My experience tells me in discussions with all the other districts that I've talked to, they're in the same boat. Whether their data looks a little bit different, or they're going 5 days a week, or they're in a hybrid, or they're fully virtual. I think, it's hard to, I like the fact that we have a medical advisory committee that's trying to help the Wauwatosa School District. They have a lot of experience from other districts as well, and even some of them working with other school districts on their plans. So, the only way to truly kind of lay it out is to get everybody else's data together and say this is exactly what's going on in Southeast Wisconsin district by district, and that's been a challenge.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Leanne?
So I wanted to follow up on Sean's point about special education students, and just want to make sure that I understand. So what we've said or what we've heard in previous conversations specific to elementary school students going back is, would there be the possibility of students 6 through 12 going back if they're a special education student? And what I'm hearing is if a special education student in 6 through 12 needs additional in-person time, that would be happening regardless. Is that correct?
I'm going to ask Mrs. Bowers to respond to it.
Sure thing. So what we have happening even currently right now while we're in a virtual model is if we have students who require specially designed instruction, we provide the opportunity for those students to come in on their hybrid days or even additional days as part of their IEP and with the permission of the parent. So we would continue to look at that.
Okay. I guess and I don't know if this, Steve, goes to the medical advisory panel or if it's really an operational question, but I would love to know if there is a way for us to have special education students back 6 to 12, like if at whatever point it is safe to have more kids in the building, that we consider that. Like, I just want us to make sure that we're thinking about opportunity gaps for students and trying to make sure that kids are not falling further behind. If we feel like we're covering that with what we're doing right now, great. If we feel like we could be doing better overall, not just for individual students, but for the special education population, I'd really like to make sure we're considering that. My second question, and again, Sean, I feel like you were reading my notes, was specific to the K4 through 2 versus K4 through 5. I'm sort of curious, is the medical advisory board going to come back to us with their recommendation, or based on what we saw tonight, is it that the board should be saying what it is they'd like to see, or is it the district saying operationally, this is what we can do most successfully? I personally would love for us to see K4 through 5 going back at the same time, but only, to Sean's point, if we can do it operationally well right from the start.
Yeah, I would answer that, Leanne. I don't think the medical advisory panel had a strong recommendation one or the other. They're comfortable with it. When those parameters are met, it's really more of what risk level, what risk tolerance do we have as a board? Some of that just has to come back to us. I mean, it's not, there's no guarantees, there's no absolutes. So it's really what's our risk tolerance. And then of course, operationally, we hear from Kristen and Dr. Ertl and what they think is the right thing to do as well.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is there's different risks either way, and we're not sending everybody back until those risks are lower. But if it's either or, I would like to advocate for the full elementary versus just half.
Thank you, Ms. Fraley. Any final board comment or questions?
Hi, I
One
actually had
other second. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So I was just wondering, Dr. Ertl, what is the likelihood that students will return back to the hybrid model on December 7th? Are there any factors that could expand that or push that date back?
Well, I think if the quarantine numbers don't actually go down and all of a sudden over Thanksgiving, we're getting a lot of cases being reported and we're not able to staff the buildings, that would have to play into it. I don't anticipate that happening, but it could happen.
Sean.
Thank you. Yeah, one last question, Dr. Ertl, this is something we talked about this week, just to have everybody just talk through it. One of the things we haven't really dove into is just the athletics. And I know that there's lots of data from WIA and like school sanctioned sports and athletics that sounds like that there's just not spread, significant spread happening amongst those athletics. And it sounds like there is, at least from what I can hear from others, like strong compliance happening where there's school staff just like making sure that that's happening. The questions I'm getting are not like school sanctioned, but more like school affiliated clubs that may be more lax in the way that they're implementing those policies. Not to say that all junior Raiders or junior Trojans or whatever clubs are not, because I don't know that, but I have heard in cases that at times there is not strong compliance happening in some of the more like affiliated club athletics, and that there may be risk associated there, and there may be limitations for what the district can really do about that because they're not governed by us. Just for community members that may be like, how are they not, complying, and they're out at some club event, and they're reaching out to the school board looking for relief. What do you think that those people should do to advocate for themselves or for their kids?
Well, I think it's have a discussion with the leaders of those organizations. The only control we have over those are self-run independent organizations. The only control we have is they use our facilities for the most part, and through the rec department of making sure that they're in compliance when they're in our buildings. But as far as going out to center court or wherever it might be for basketball or soccer or whatever the clubs are doing, I think it's just trying to continue to educate them. And I know, I've seen it and heard the same things you're talking about where they're not complying. And I think there's been an outbreak in one of those recreation centers that it's not in our district outside of Wauwatosa because of the reasons you're talking about. I think it's just an education piece. I don't know that, like I said, as a district, we have no control. It's just strongly encouraging those groups to follow the recommendations that are being followed in interscholastic sports and activities.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm only thinking I can't think of any just like obvious all the time bad actor. If there was one, I think we could do more. If it's just like an instance here and an instance there, then it probably just makes better sense for parents themselves. Everything.
Yeah, we've had conversations in the past with groups and saying you're not going to be able to use our facilities for different, it was pre-COVID, but it was for different violations, and just saying you're not going to be able to use it if you don't follow these rules. That's the thing. The district, like I said, we do have control over the use of our facilities, and we don't have to allow people to use them, whether they're bad actors on district property or they're doing something off of district property and bringing danger into the schools because of it. I think there's a relationship that could be looked at if there's cases.
Last call, board questions. Okay. Jamie? Let's open this up for community comment and questions. A reminder for the community, you're welcome to post comment. Any questions, the district staff will do their best to make sure things are kind of gathered and put in our FAQs. for things that are themed. And please introduce yourself, you share your name and your address, and limit yourself to 3 minutes.
Eric Peterson, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
This is Eric Peterson, 12016 West Hadley Street. And I just wanted to thank the board and thank the medical advisory panel for continuing the good work that they've done, and keeping in mind that in-person schooling is what we're all looking for eventually. And as soon as we can get there, the sooner we can get there, the better, keeping everything in mind for the safety and obviously the staffing of the schools. And that's all I really have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have no more hands raised at this moment.
Any community comment in the room?
Good evening. Joseph McLeod, 772 North 116th Street. I really question what we're doing in total. Under 3 months into our school year, where our students have gotten less than 2/5 of the education they should have, we shut down our schools for 2 weeks. For what reason? Because of outbreaks? No. Because of operations. We keep hearing operations, operations, operations. What this indicates to me is this school district has been unprepared for going back to school since day one. We've had essentially 8 months since the pandemic started, and yet we are still not prepared to bring our school kids back to class. We should have been prepared each and every time that we had talked about going back to 5 days a week to be in school on those dates, and yet we're still not prepared. It's amazing that under critical positions like this, school board members are not even in this room having this discussion. We've got a medical advisory panel that indicates that it is safer for kids to be in school than out of school. Community spread is much more likely out of school than it is in school. Yet we keep concerning ourselves with things. So shutting down for 3 weeks is due to operations. And okay, maybe in a school here and there, we can't staff it properly. But in all 17 of our schools, there's no way that we had teacher shortages in all 17 schools. We should not be shorting our students one single more day than they already been shorted. We need to look at adding time to our classes. Take away this Wednesday break stuff that we don't need. Switch between 2 days a week and 3 days a week if we go back to the hybrid, which is a big question, is if we're actually going to get there. My belief is that we're going to go back to the point in time and we're going to find some reason why this district will not go back to class. We're going to stay in hybrid mode, extended period of time. If and when the high school students get back to class is a big question. My guess is they probably will never get back to class this entire school year based on what we've been told. This is simply ridiculous. We are ruining the education of the students of Wauwatosa. It is your job to be educating students, and you guys are not doing your jobs. Figure a way to get this done, to get our kids back in class 5 days a week, not K through 4, not K through 5, K through 12. All our kids deserve a proper education, and the Tosa School District needs to figure a way to do it. Start doing this today.
Thank you.
Hi, Beth Mandel, 2620 North 63rd Street. We have a second grader, a kindergartner, and a 3-year-old. I continue to urge our board to get these children who want or must be in school in person 5 days a week back as soon as possible. As we've heard and learned, in-school spread is independent of community spread. Our own medical panel says school is the safest place for our children. Let me tell you a little bit about our struggles. This morning, my kindergartner said, "I want to go virtual every day." Of course he does. On his virtual days, he goes to a childcare provider who helps him with his learning. From 7:30 to 3:30, he spends about 2 hours engaging in schoolwork, and the rest watching YouTube, playing games, often laying down while he does this. Our children go here because both my husband and I work outside the home. While my kindergartner in particular loves the social aspect of his in-school days, it's an easy temptation to fall into. Discipline is already difficult to instill at these young ages. Additionally, we've learned that 2 math units have been removed due to time issues in our second graders class. Important topics like geometry and data collection and analysis are passed over, clearly proving that despite the amazing efforts by our teachers, our children will fall behind. In addition to the clear educational decline, I'd like to point out the financial impact to our family. Due to needing external supports because we work outside the home, we are on track to spend thousands of dollars more for a fraction of the results. During the most recent Med Panel meeting, it seemed as if we were at this tipping point where we were talking about the discussion of getting students in school 5 days a week. Contrast that to the next day, and all of our schools are virtual. It is clear that the crux of this issue is operations. If a 3 to 5% teacher absence rate causes the inability to operate, the district must see this as the biggest bottleneck to resolve. Creative solutions have been given and a blind eye turned to these. If you don't have the supply you need, if you don't have the staff you need, you create a new model. Despite our very best efforts, we cannot control external factors such as masking and distancing, adherence in our community. We do our very best individually, but when we fix our eyes on these macro issues, we divert our attention from the things we can control and from creating an actionable plan to 5 days education. Despite our greatest hopes for this district,
30 seconds left.
Our family is touring a private school tomorrow and likely will make the very difficult decision to transition out of Wauwatosa Public Schools. This change will result in a $0 net impact financially to our family to achieve all 5 days in person. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other community comment, we are going to return to our agenda. It was laid out. I believe we are on business services action items. Sean, this one is for you to read. This is the Eisenhower Elementary School HVAC safety and security updates fully scoped. And you're on mute.
There we go. Sorry about that. It is recommended that the school board approve the project at Eisenhower Elementary School, bid package number 001, fully scoped for selective demolition, concrete, masonry, miscellaneous metals, carpentry, damp proofing, roofing, doors, glass, drywall, flooring, painting, HVAC, electrical, access control, earthwork, asphalt, and fencing for a total of $3,289,198, which is included in the referendum improvement budget. I so move.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rolland, and thank you, Mr. Meyer. Melissa, anything you want to walk us through? This is kind of your...
Is this one on?
Yep.
Okay. Really quick, just synopsis of this bid package. Everything was accepted. We accepted all low bids. So this is all the low bids. This is exactly on budget. We were actually able to include an alternate backup generator. Also, second to last award recommendation that will be coming to the board for VGS and the work through the referendum.
Any board questions or comments?
Yes, may I make a comment?
Yes.
Melissa, I would like to thank you. I'm sure that this work you have here is done as all of the other work that I've seen you do over the years with an eye towards natural light and aesthetics and atmosphere and architecture. And so I think it's relevant to what we're saying here because I know you brought your philosophies to everything you've done. So I support this motion and a very heartfelt thank you.
Thank you.
Any other board comment or questions? Any community comment or questions on this item?
John McBooth, 772 North 116th Street. I question what are we doing? We're making improvements to buildings. We should not be starting any new projects, any new improvements, anything like that. In a year in which we told our teachers that they will not be getting raises for all the hard work they've been doing, we should be allocating funds that way. Allocating funds to the electronics that we need to help our students learn during this pandemic. We should not be spending one additional penny that we don't absolutely positively have to be spending on buildings or improvements that aren't absolutely necessarily needed. Switch the money to where it's actually needed to the education of our students. Don't be putting it to pretty buildings that are not being used. Our buildings are 2/5 capacity at this point in time because we're only using them 2 out of 5 days. We should not be spending money on buildings and grounds and stuff like that that's not needed this time. Defer that to some different date. Use that money for our students, for our teachers who deserve our raises at this point in time. You begged us to ask our legislatures for increased funding to help our teachers, and yet we're going to spend $3 million on a new proposal? This is ridiculous.
Thank you. Point of information is that this is referendum funds and is not legally able to be reallocated for anything other than the specific referendum uses of which it was determined. Jamie, any other community comment?
No hands raised.
Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Mr. Dillman?
Yes.
Ms. Braley?
Yes, I support us following the law and using the funds appropriately.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Ms. Musso?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Dr. Jessica Fanger?
Yes. And that item passes unanimously. Our next item, always a fun time of year to hear some of the creative ideas our teachers are coming up with. It's a new high school course presentation provided by a number of members of our teaching and learning team and instructors.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nicole Marble. I am the Director of Secondary Education for the district. And I have a great panel of educators with me this evening that are going to present to you some of the new courses that we are looking to implement next school year. As we go through the courses today. We're coming to you with these courses proposed through the vision of a graduate lens, as well as through the lens of our pillars of equity. And so that is something that is at the heart of everything that we have prepared for you today. So as the teachers go through the different courses that we have, they will be explaining why these courses are of benefit for our students. They will be going through some different logistical aspects of the courses, such as credits and any prerequisites that would be required of our students. And then I will be following up after each of the courses, other than our launch courses, to explain just a little bit about the financial implications that will go along with the implementation of these courses, such as FTE and any projected funds necessary to support professional learning or curriculum development. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Tina Cook, who is going to kick us off with our new launch courses.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having us this evening. As Nicole stated, my name is Tina Cook, and I am the Secondary Innovation Specialist, and also helping to lead the launch program for the district. I'm just going to take a few minutes tonight to speak briefly about the program before we move forward with 2 courses that we would like to propose this evening. I'm really excited to be here as we're diving deeper into looking at pathways and careers in high school. The launch program gives students an opportunity to become immersed in a professional culture, to explore areas of interest, to solve real-world problems, and to use industry standard tools. So our learners connect, they work and are coached by employers, employees, and professionals in our community, and within their professions of choice. And they all receive, while doing so, they receive high school and potentially college credit, as well as industry recognized certifications or credentials. The projects that students take on are designed to meet employer and employee needs, to invite innovation, entrepreneurship, and provide opportunity for career in or industry exploration. So when students complete the launch program, they would have been exposed to industry brands, they build a professional network of support, they develop credentials that will foster continuous improvement through lifelong learning, collaboration, and problem-solving skills. And they learn how to be independent and learn for themselves. And then launch also connects students to internships and job opportunities that connect to their professional plan and their academic career plan as well. So the 2 courses that we're proposing tonight are actually going to be integrated into 2 new strands this year. Altogether, between Elmbrook and Wauwatosa, we will have 14 strands next year for students to choose from, which is really exciting. The 2 that we're going to be speaking about tonight are in the area of skilled building trades and foundations of body systems and disease. Thank you.
So I'll turn it over to Janine Bergruen and Deb Myrtle to talk about mathematics for skilled trades.
Good evening. I am Debbie Myrtle, Instructional Equity Coach for Secondary Mathematics. Our goal in offering this course is to give students the mathematical tools necessary to be successful in the skilled trades, which are becoming increasingly driven by technology. Students would master the mathematical content standards by learning about them in the context of these industries. Some of these standards students have been introduced to in previous math courses, and some standards will be new to students. In addition to the mathematical content standards that are a focus in this course, students will actively engage in several of the mathematical practice standards, the standards that describe the type of consumers and producers of information we want our students to become. These mathematical practice standards include perseverance in problem solving, constructing and communicating viable arguments, critiquing the reasoning of others, choosing appropriate mathematical tools, and attending to precision. If these sound familiar, they align quite well with the Wauwatosa School District vision of a graduate and equity goals. Janine will tell you a little bit more about the course.
Okay. Hello, my name's Janine Bergruen, and I am a high school math teacher at Wauwatosa West High School. In this proposed course, students will learn the skills necessary to be successful in completing industry-driven problems. Teachers will differentiate lessons to meet students at their current proficiency level and lead them to mastery of course content. Teachers can provide opportunity for practice in areas where students may need reinforcement, as well as support in their learning of new topics such as those covered in Algebra 2, for example, systems of equations or trigonometry. Using a problem-based, hands-on learning approach will hopefully motivate the need for learning mathematical techniques necessary to solve the problem. Students will apply mathematical concepts learned to projects supported by and developed by businesses and organizations within our community. These industry-identified needs include not only the application of mathematical concepts, but time management, teamwork, and communication skills, both written and oral form, as students construct solutions to real-world problems. Our hope is students will be inspired to pursue a career in skilled building trades. Of course, the intent of this course is to inform and inspire by finally answering the student's question of when am I ever going to use this math? So if you could go to the next slide, please. Deb?
This course would be a year-long course in which students would earn 1 credit. Students will have completed algebra and geometry as prerequisites and have junior or senior standing. This course will be offered with a light building construction course with the possibility of crossover in project-based assessments. Initially, this course will be offered through launch at Wauwatosa East High School with the potential to be expanded in the future. Thank you for your time this evening.
I'm not sure if Chris is back. Chris Tyling had just some quick things to take care of, but I can do my best with his course as well. So this course called Health and Disease will be integrated into our Foundations of Body Systems and Disease strand. So right now we currently have a strand that's hosted through Elmbrook, and that's focused on medicine and healthcare. So it really involves topics around patient care or bedside care. And we have had a number of students in Wauwatosa who have expressed interest in the medical field. And so we thought this would be a great next step. And we have also seen students who are very interested in disease and health. So we thought this would be, again, another course to offer for students interested in in the medical field. Students, again, there's a focus on medical and healthcare careers. So we work with our Pro Health, we work with Children's, we work with the Medical College of Wisconsin and our surrounding community members to really immerse students in the professional culture of what it is to be a medical professional. The course specifically focuses in just that, in health and disease and how it applies to the various body systems. So students will be focused on anatomy and physiology and looking at the body systems, but then the impact of the diseases on the body systems, specifically cancer, Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, and many others. Course logistics, again, very similar in terms of the structure and framework as the math in the NTech Ed. It'll be a year long. Right now, there's really no prerequisites to the launch program. We really want to provide equal access for students who are interested in the program. It will integrate with the anatomy and physiology course to create the Foundations of Body Systems strand and launch. So really any junior or senior can take this. The course will begin at Wauwatosa West to provide students the high quality project-based learning experience. And we're also looking at industry credentials that we could offer students in addition to potentially the CNA certification. We will be looking at expanding the course outside of launch in the near future as well. So financial implications, each strand is 2 teachers for 2 periods a day. So for example, within our skilled building trades, we have a tech ed teacher who will be teaching the construction aspect, and then Ms. Bergruen will be teaching the math course. And so again, we bring in students from Elmbrook and from Wauwatosa. We're expanding to other schools as well to bring them in and give them that professional based experience. We have budgeted $10,000 per strand. Again, that's approximate. We have not spent near that as much, especially with COVID and so forth, but that money go towards supplies, materials, certifications such as CNA, or potentially even dual credit opportunities as well. And then summer professional learning that we provide for our teachers the summer before we launch new strands.
Thank you, Tina. I'm going to talk a little bit about our expansion of AVID. As the board, I'm sure, is aware, we implemented AVID at our 2 high schools a couple of years ago. And with AVID, we have the elective course, which really works to solidify some of the skills that all students have access to learning with the rigorous Wicker strategies, they call it, where it's around writing, inquiry, reading, collaboration, and I missed one. Organization, excuse me. And so we are going to be moving that down into our middle school and our elementary schools. And today I'm just going to talk about our AVID elective at the middle school. So AVID, again, is really about providing our students with rigorous instruction and having it be a core framework for our students and our teachers to have some commonalities around. And AVID stands for the Advancement via Individual Determination. It's really about that interdependence of students and helping them be lifelong learners and develop those skills and the metacognitive strategies that are involved in being able to be self-sufficient learners. And the AVID elective is really supports, again, those school-wide strategies, and we will be looking to implement that in our seventh grade next year. So that AVID elective will be a year long. And again, the plan is for 7th grade next year, and then the 22-23 school year, we would move that up to 8th grade. At this time, we are not looking at 6th grade AVID elective because 6th grade is still considered to be elementary and has a number of statewide expectations that prevent us from being a little bit more flexible with our students' schedules. And again, AVID, as has been presented in the past with the high school, really the elective is really targeted towards our academic middle. So we will be screening students that meet the specific AVID criteria that the AVID organization has. And students will also engage in a written application and an interview process as we select which students really encompass the qualities of what we are able to support with that AVID elective. Just like at the high school, when we implemented it there, we were looking for a 0.5 FTE to support the implementation and launch of this school-wide and with the elective, so that FTE would support a site coordinator and the elective teacher at both of our middle schools. As a way to support the learning for our teachers, both to do the AVID elective and to scale it out school-wide, we do send teachers to what's called the AVID Summer Institute, and that's approximately a $14,000 cost that we have budgeted over quite some time now to be able to plan ahead for those different financial costs. And I'm going to now turn it over to Kelly Frederick, art teacher at Tosa East, and Chelsea Bellick, art teacher at Tosa West, to talk about animation and moving images.
Hi, everybody. The animation course is a one semester, half credit course that we are hoping to offer instead of our pretty popular black and white course, which we are kind of outgrowing. The darkroom is very quickly becoming a thing of the past. And we wanted to offer something to our students that we've heard a lot of requests for, not only from our current students, but from our kids who go on in the arts and are taking a lot of film and animation courses in college and are saying how much they would have liked that preparation. We do right now teach a little bit of animation in both advanced placement photography and in our digital imagery class. And the kids are really excited about it and are hoping to make that part of a daily practice. one of the things that I've kind of paid attention to is I have 3 kids now who have gone through the art department at Tosa East and now have moved on through college and beyond. And as they are young adults looking into profession into the arts, almost all of those jobs require that they know Adobe Animate, that they can animate for all sorts of different kinds of professions. So that's kind of the other thing that we were hearing from our recent grads. Lots of student interest in doing it. So, and you know, even though it looks like none of our faculty is a day over 30, we do think that as we get older, our faculty gets older, it's harder to find young teachers who know how to teach a black and white photography course. So this would make it easier to hire in the future to find teachers who know how to do this. You can go to the next slide if you want. All of our courses, for the most part, ask freshmen to take art foundations as a prerequisite, but we would allow freshmen, if they had space in their schedule, to choose a second elective. We would like to also open it up to our freshmen, if they're interested. It might be nice for freshmen to have another art elective choice. The cost, there wouldn't be any additional FTEs because, again, it's replacing the black and white course. Most of the other costs are tied to technology and upgrades to our current labs. And if we have a tier 2, Nicole, you might be able to talk about that a little bit more in terms of getting MacBook Pros or iPads and Apple Pencils down the line, and West needs some space that way too, that maybe Jesse you can address. But again, we have been teaching this with what we currently have, just on a smaller scale. So there are also ways to tier it.
Yeah, I can add to that. So as Kelly alluded to, our 2 high schools have different technology currently in-house. And so we could make this course work at Tosa East with what we have. We would need to upgrade some of the technology that we have at Tosa West in order to make this run for next year. And in terms of the technology, the 2 different tiers that we have there, it's really kind of our wish list in order as we look to scale this out down the road in what we need to budget for. In addition to what Kelly was alluding to with the space at West, currently the art space at Tosa West is not super conducive to allowing us to run the other art courses in addition to adding this one in. And so Melissa does have an art reconfigure project, an art space reconfigured project in the buildings and grounds plan for the 21-22 school year. So it is scheduled to break ground, so to speak. I'm not super high on my terms with that. So Melissa, you'll have to correct me, in the July of 2021 to conclude then the following July of 2022. So we might need to push pause on this course at Tosa West, given space and or technology, but this is something that we would look to implement in the very near future at Tosa West, but for sure at Tosa East. And then with that, I will turn it over to Jean Biebel, English teacher at Tosa East, and Chris Lazarski, English and Social Studies teacher at Tosa West, to talk about media communications and writing for publication.
Hi, good evening. The proposal made by Chris and I tonight are born of 5 years of extensive collaboration centered on our teaching of writing for publication and media communication, both of which are semester-long English electives offered to juniors and seniors. Historically, these 2 offerings have been some of the most diverse courses in our buildings in terms of both ability and race, bringing a true cross-section of our student population together. I highlight the diversity of these classes because both promote and celebrate student voice through multi-platform journalism and offer students an opportunity to authentically shape the culture of our schools, as we have seen through our schools' video announcements and our social media platforms. Additionally, both classes engage students with professionals from PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Labs in Washington, D.C., along with Wisconsin Public Television in Madison and Milwaukee Public Television here at home. These partnerships have allowed for our students' work to be shown during the national broadcast of PBS NewsHour, and their work has been highlighted on the websites of both Wisconsin Public Television and Milwaukee Public Television. Tonight, we are here to ask you that these two courses be broadened to allow any student grades 9 through 12 to enroll, and to allow these students to re-enroll for elective credits. In doing so, students who have found a passion for multi-platform journalism can grow and deepen their emerging digital literacy skills. Currently, we have no option for students to grow intermediate and advanced skills, and this expansion would help address this deficiency. Logistically, the project-based nature of these courses would allow for students re-enrolling to be scheduled concurrently with other sections, allowing for more advanced students to use a hybrid model as they pursue independent and group-related projects. Thank you for your consideration, and now Chris will outline our new course proposal.
Yeah, my name is Chris Lazarski. I teach social studies and English at Wauwatosa West High School. And I just want to talk a little bit about a new class called Media Leadership and Management that Jean and I have been talking about. So first of all, the student news, there's a few reasons for offering this class. So this class would really allow students the space and time to run the student journalism programs at Tosa West and Tosa East. So the student news publications, the Cardinal News at East and the West Side Stories are currently being combined. So I think the school board members, you may have received a press release from Wauwatosa West student Sarah Stanislavski about the new website, the Tosa Compass, and the associated social media accounts. And that is it's a piece of this effort. But what this would do is allow students the space and time from both schools to work together to develop a common publication, production goals, to work together to plan, to manage, produce content, coordinate the work of individual teams in each school. So each school is going to have their own journalism staff and MediaCom writing for publication or extracurricularly, but the leadership teams from Tosa West and Tosa East will be working together. And they have been, actually. They've been doing it now for 2 weeks, and it's been a wonderful collaboration between students from both schools. They've, published already like 6 or 7 articles. The Instagram page has been updated 3 or 4 times today. And I didn't do any of it, which is awesome. So students will be trained in the use of specific technical and media literacy skills required to publish the content on the internet, right? They're publishing real content for real people. These students will be in charge of publishing to their website, associated social media on a daily basis. It's a curricular expectation and will require students to identify and develop numerous skills and media literacy skills. So they're learning how to manage a website, how to modify content for various social media platforms, how to schedule, how to publish social media content, when to publish it, how to analyze and examine information using Google Analytics to understand when something should be published. And all the while, they're also developing these these high-level media literacy skills. And importantly, one of the most important things is that students are provided with leadership and management training. Okay, so in high school, students are often expected to take a leadership role, but we rarely have that space to provide formal guidance and training to support how to fulfill these positions. So managing staff, running content for a website and social media accounts provides a real and unique learning experience for students, and demands specific and separate curricular support and training. So I think this class will really fill a space and allow students to develop a program that's not only talking about stories in their own schools and within the Wauwatosa School District, but also stories within our community. And I know that's one of their goals, is to expand their coverage and tell more stories about what's going on in Wauwatosa. So thank you.
Chris, did you want to talk about the logistics, or would you like me to do that?
Sure. So it's going to be, so we'd like it to be a year-long course, right? So we'd like to have students who are enrolled for the entire year. It would also, successful completion of the writing for publication or media communications would be good. Probably the first year. There might be some students who haven't taken that class, but we'll see. It should be students above, coming into 10th, 11th, or 12th grade. And it could be scheduled as a hybrid, right? One of the ideas here too is to have students at East and students at West both taking the course at the same time. I think one thing we've learned from educating during this pandemic is that connecting kids like that is possible. It's possible, I think, with a structured curriculum and a focused project to connect kids using Canvas, using Zoom, at both schools, right? So if we had students at both schools taking the same course, and this could be scheduled as a hybrid, also where the students are in class 2 days a week, and then they're taking another class or pursuing projects and working on things for the class independently.
Yeah, and due to the hybrid nature of this course, and the fact that it's a half credit for a whole entire year, we are also thinking that this course would not need to meet on a daily basis, but really have that college style feel to it, where students come together, 2 or 3 times a week to touch base on the projects that they're doing, engage in some of that leadership training that Chris was talking about, and really have it be that fluid, flexible, hybrid model that we often see on college campuses. And again, presenting another opportunity for students to develop that interdependence as well. And we would be also looking for approximately about $1,500 for curriculum development, like we've already proposed for some of the other courses this evening. And with that concludes our presentation on the new courses that we are looking to implement next school year. So thank you.
Thank you all very much. Lots of ground covered, lots of really creative ideas. Questions and comments from the board?
Dr. Jess Banger, I'll just say these sound incredible for the students. I'm honestly sitting here a little bit having a panic attack that the students are going to have the knowledge of digital animation, storytelling, writing, design, website layout. I'm like, oh no, that's what I do. They're coming. So anybody in communications, public relations, get on your A game, get back to school, because they're coming. Apparently our high school kids are coming for us. I mean, it sounds amazing. What an incredible opportunity for the students. I need to put my head up and figure this out now. So thank you for putting this together. It sounds amazing.
Ms. Fraley.
I just wanted to say as well, thank you for the unbelievable creativity. I having kids in the high school now, the biggest problem is choosing between all the amazing courses, and seeing Launch Expand is fantastic. I'd love to know that someday the plumber that comes into my house is, a former TOSA grad. And the thing that I just wanted to call out explicitly that I really appreciate, and I feel like Kelly, Jean, Chris, like almost all of you touched on this, is we are listening to what businesses and former students are telling us they need. They are our best source of information, and school is really different than it was when we were in school. And the fact that TOSA is recognizing that, I think is really important. Even I hear sometimes from parents on our asynchronous days that their kids, the kind of work that they're doing doesn't feel like schoolwork. They're not sitting and memorizing or whatever they're doing, projects. They're on Zoom calls with other kids. Like, that's what's really exciting for me when I walk into classrooms and see what y'all are doing. So thank you so much for, on top of your already gigantic jobs this year, still thinking forward and about like what education can look like for our students, so that they are doing stuff that they love, that they are being prepared for what's going to be expected of them when they get out into the workforce or college, and that we are giving kids opportunities to develop really critical thinking skills that will make them successful long term. Like, the days of kids needing to know information is gone. Kids just need to know where to find information. What they need to know is how to think and how to be creative and problem solve. And I see that, in spades through all of these courses. And I do appreciate, while it makes me sad to think that black and white photography might disappear, these are like the decisions we have to make. And I would encourage us to also think about, like, what are the courses that are no longer sticking around? And those are hard decisions too. Just because I don't envy students having to make these choices of what classes they're taking and what they can and can't fit into their schedule. So thank you. This is really exciting, and I think a really important shot in the arm for school board members after the last couple of months. So this was a really great presentation to listen to.
I'm going to go to... Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to respond to that about your comment about information and what kids are learning and what college is like. And one of the things that I thought about as I was putting the animation and film course together was listening to my own college students who are sophomore and junior at the University of Michigan, both studying different aspects of art and design. And one of the things that they have told me repeatedly is that when they go to class, like if they go to an animation class, so right now my daughter's in two animation and 2 film courses, they expect that she already knows how to do it. They don't teach them how to use the programs at all. That's just assumed. So one of the things that I personally take great pride in terms of our art department is that when I read and look at those visions of a Wauwatosa graduate, one of the things that all of our art courses strive to do is that exact thing that you mentioned, is how to solve problems creatively, laterally, how to trust that thinking. And we're really excited that now our kids are going to be able to have the opportunity to do that through moving pictures, and hopefully be a little bit more prepared with that knowledge base that colleges really just are assuming. They assumed both of my kids knew Photoshop, that they knew Illustrator, that they knew After Effects before they got there. And we're doing a really good job of preparing them that way. I'm really proud of the work that our colleagues are doing, but I do think it's something to keep in mind as we also talk about what courses are we letting go of. And that was hard for us to let go of the black and white course. We love that course. Our kids love it. But those are the things that also were driving forces in terms of us introducing this course.
I wanted to say, so I'm a participant in Launch Medicine and Healthcare, and I just am very excited to see the Launch program expand because every day when I go to Brookfield, I get to see how much fun it is and how much we all are learning, and Launch has provided me with some amazing opportunities that I never would have gotten before. So.
Thanks, Aiden. We're happy to have you.
I'd also just like to thank everybody who worked on these programs. it's so cool that students are getting so many more opportunities to dive into their passions, and this is just a really great way to get students excited about upcoming courses. So yeah, thank you so much for all of your time and effort. This means a lot to us.
If I could just add, I really appreciate the forward thinking, I think, of these courses and what you're trying to accomplish. We're not sitting on the status quo, right? We're looking at where the world's at and what do we need. And I think that's fantastic. And I think you touched on it a little bit, but continue to think about too how we deliver these courses, right? I mean, we've really learned a lot, I think, in the last 8 months, whether we wanted to or not, of how kids can kind of learn and students can learn, people can work, and all those types of things. So I don't know, the courses have to be delivered in a 1-hour class, on every day at 1 o'clock. I don't know if that has to happen. There's many ways to do it. And I think some of these courses maybe even lend themselves, specifically to do it. Maybe some courses you do. That's not for me to figure out. You are experts at that, and I'm sure you can. But really, think about how do we deliver it? How do we be cutting edge on that? Maybe that helps people with schedules and, we can't fit it all in. But if you deliver it a different way, maybe we can fit in more things and do things that our students really want to do and really want to attach themselves to. So I know you're already thinking about those things. I just want to encourage you to continue to do it. I think it's great. And maybe there's some good that can be learned from all the stuff that we've gone through the last 8 or 9 months. So thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Doman. Any final board comment before we go to community comment? Seeing none. Jamie, any community comment?
Sarah Stanislavski, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Hi, my name is Sarah Stanislavski. I live on 2530 North 111th Street. And I just wanted to talk about the re-enrollment in writing for publication and media communications, and also the leadership course. I took writing for publication as a freshman at West with Mr. Lazarski, and it was just a really great experience. And since then, I've been involved in the journalism extracurricular program, and I'm also taking media communications as an independent study right now. And overall, being involved in the journalism program and specifically having class time to be involved has been really meaningful and helpful, because journalism skills, as Mr. Lazarski always says, are thinking skills. And I think that holds very true, because it allows students to be able to think about what content and forms of media they're consuming in the world, and overall just gain a bit better understanding of other people's perspectives in the world. And I think being able to communicate with other students, specifically in the leadership class, would be able to be very helpful in helping students gain more meaningful leadership skills as well. So thank you for all the presenters today.
There are no more hands raised.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. I would just echo the comments of my colleagues. This is the creative thinking that's going on here. I think, Leanne, you commented like there's a dose of positive energy here. And I'm really feeling that. I'm excited about kind of where we're going. I know there's some fantastic teachers doing incredible work this year, and I know it often felt like that because it is such a heavy lift. And I hope that you are all feeling that you are learning some things, that you're applying some things, and that you will quickly and soon enough be back feeling like you're having the impact that you are. I will say, I have a middle schooler who took me through about 45 minutes of explaining why the hybrid model was better for her learning and the intensive impact that she's had on learning. I don't think there's a lot of folks who are going to always agree with that, but there's positive in all these different pieces. So Chris, when you were talking about kind of the hybrid model and how you're applying that, I think there's some interesting things there. And I think depending on kind of who the independent learner is and whether or not they're ready for it and what you can do, I think there's some fascinating things that we might be able to think about with curriculum. And so kudos to all of you for pushing this stuff forward. I'm excited about seeing where this is going. And wow, the opportunities, I think, for creative thought is endless. And I'm excited with what this team will bring forward to us next year. Awesome. I think you'll be back in December, I believe, for a vote on this. Thank you all very much. Appreciate you staying with us late tonight. Speaking of being thankful for people who stayed with us late tonight, I think we're moving into building and grounds report, referendum budget, and project update. I just feel like I keep saying thank you to you over and over and over.
No need. No need. It's an amazing team that puts it all together and makes it happen. I just get the fortunate part of presenting it. All right. I'm going to attempt to share this. Thank you, Tim. Okay, so good evening again. Hopefully we'll continue on the positive vibe that was just presented. We're going to give an update tonight on the construction projects via the referendum. And tonight we've got some fantastic people with us. Ryan Kaplanek, Ryan Steenhagen, Chris Coggins, Chad Bathke from BJS Construction are going to be doing the majority of the presenting tonight to give an update, as all of those individuals manage different aspects of the referendum. Also with us is Nick Kent and Doug Kundi from PRA, and they are the architects on this all this amazing work that's happening. So with that, I'm going to kick it off to Ryan Kaplanek, who's going to talk about Lincoln WSTEM.
Thanks, Melissa.
Sorry.
So kind of jumping right in, we were asked to provide updates, completion photos for Lincoln, kind of highlights for Lincoln and Underwood, and then we'll give progress photos for Wilson, WSTEM, and McKinley. So right in Lincoln, this first slide here is a rendering showing the west elevation on Lincoln. And Melissa, if you go to the next slide, this is kind of our drone photo, kind of that sister image of that rendering. So overall shot showing the two parts of the building and the courtyard there. Want to go to the next one, Melissa? Another drone elevation, kind of giving some perspective. This is looking to the south. East High School is over there on the left-hand side of the photo. The new building was in the background of the picture, and the existing renovation building was in the foreground of the picture. The shot, I think, is the cool one. It kind of highlights the courtyard area, a busy area since we turned that over with the community. The playground area, the outdoor classroom, the outdoor patio in the building, all really cool spaces for the school.
And Ryan, I'm just going to interrupt you for just a second here. I just want to send out a thank you to John and Tasha Mortgage, who donated for the outdoor classroom here at this location. So if you see in this picture, it shows it very nicely. The ground level and the rooftop level coincide together with a green roof, solar technology, solar tubes. So it's pretty amazing things. And if you get an opportunity, I encourage the community to go out and check out the great donation that was provided right by them.
Okay, some interior highlights. So the picture on the left doesn't do it justice, but that's the gym. It is much larger in person, a lot of natural daylight there. The picture on the right is of the IMC, kind of give you an idea of the cloud concept incorporated throughout the building for the ceilings. And then that's a cool picture because it's right where the two buildings join. So the IMC space on the mid-level is the photo on the right. Some standard kind of typical pictures. The two photos on the left are of standard kind of collaboration spaces. And then the two photos on the right are standard typical classroom areas. So open concept on the classrooms that kind of roll out to the collaboration areas that are sprinkled throughout the building. And then I think this is my favorite slide. So I think PRA and the district did a great job of kind of incorporating historical nuggets in the project. Top left, whether it's existing brick facade that was incorporated in finished design, the right-hand picture, balusters that were reused from the existing staircase. And then bottom left is doors that were repurposed for signage at the main entry.
All right, I am Ryan Steenhagen, the project manager for the Underwood School. I'll give an update on, and the McKinley shortly. So this photo here is kind of the rendering of what the school is going to look like about 2 years ago, PRA's design. And then the next slide kind of shows you what we had there. Can't show the page. Let's try the next page there, Melissa.
Sorry, Ryan, 1 second.
Yep.
It looks the same. How's that?
Well, we will go to the next one, Ryan.
Okay, perfect. This is kind of the front of the building looking out to the south from the inside. The existing building was right where that parking lot was. Pulled that building, the new building, further back in the property, giving a lot more on-site parking and developing a drop-off lane, on a larger drop-off lane to drop off the kids safer to the front of the building. Again, you see the front of the Underwood Elementary School's got a lot more hard space in the front and more safety features while dropping off the kids. Next one. And then getting on the inside, the interior, probably the biggest highlight of this building is the large common space as you enter into the building. The photo on the left is as you enter in the right-hand side of the building, you got the Firefly Cafe. And then the photo on the right is the performance platform that opens up to both sides of the gym and the common space. Very large, tall ceilings and lots of natural light coming in. The second floor on the right-hand side of the building above the Firefly Cafe is the library that overlooks into the common space. The next slide here, the left-hand side, that's your classrooms. Typical classroom with lots of daylight, lots of lighting and lots of space for sure as an upgrade from the old existing building. And then on the right-hand side is a kind of a cool breakout reading nook, kind of right off the common space. You'll see right in the center of the picture there, we salvaged the Aesop Fable bricks from the existing building and incorporated them into the reading nook off the common space.
Jumping into Wilson, currently under construction, and the first part of construction for us at Wilson was renovation of the existing building to remain, and that completed this summer. So this picture here is just kind of a rendering from PRA looking at the main entry on the south side of the building. Some standard interior shots from our work that finished up this summer on the existing building. So on the left, we have typical breakout spaces in classrooms, and then kind of a typical corridor shot, just to kind of get a feel for color schemes, finishes, cubbies, tack board, those types of things. A large majority of the first phase of this turnover was classroom space. And then I think we skipped one. It was just an overall drone shot, but it highlighted the fact that as part of the first phase, we had some building demolition going on that showed some demolition on the existing gym. It had a shot of footings and foundations that were going in since we finished that first phase of work. And the two pictures here are on the left is the gym concrete masonry unit, CMU work. And then on the right is the steel erection in the north wing classroom. Great.
Ryan, are you on mute by chance?
I lost connection. Sorry. Lost connection on mine. Slide over here. McKinley Elementary, quick update there. Melissa, next slide. So on the north side of the building, we're moving along quite well. We've got the 3-story structure up. We're working on building enclosure. We've got about 80% of the brick wrapped up on the north side of the building and moving over towards windows. Plan is to try to have the building, we will have the building watertight by the end of the year. We got temporary measures on the windows right now so we can start some interior work while we're procuring the windows. On the interior upper left-hand corner is it's kind of the breakout space. We're just starting to hang drywall, starting to tape and finish drywall in that area. Bottom left-hand side is the second floor classroom, kind of looking through one of those large sliding glass doors that combines both classrooms. And then the right-hand side is the second floor in the south section of the building, which has the music room and the choir room and art room without the walls up quite yet, but we're moving in that direction to get above ceiling rough in going in there.
Ryan, I apologize. One of them's going to slip again. If anybody is interested in seeing these slides, they are updated and they're all uploaded in the Google Board Docs.
Nope, is that you?
Yeah, this is capital improvement jobs, but I think there was some milestone dates that you guys wanted to hit upon about where you guys were at with construction complete for both Wilson and McKinley, Wilson W. STEM.
Yep. For McKinley, we're about 40% complete with that project. We're ahead of schedule right now on the new building, which will be wrapped up in July. And then the existing building starts demolition as soon as school's out in June and wraps up in October for phase 2.
Yeah, and then for Wilson Elementary, I would say that we're kind of right there as well. We're at 40 to 45% complete, and we are tracking for completion end of July 2021. And from a schedule standpoint, we're right where we were hoping we would be at this time.
All right, we'll go through some slides. For anybody that doesn't know me, my name is Chris Coggins. Good to see everybody again. The project executive on these referendum projects with the team. Going through the capital improvement jobs that were completed this past year. So there's a handful of them. The first one you're looking at is the Washington Elementary lift project, where we provided ADA compliance. The picture on the left is where we modified the existing stairs to allow this lift to be installed. And then from the outside on the right-hand side, we ramped. This used to be stairs there, and we provided a ramp up to the building, and then updated the glass and doors at the entrance there. Also at Washington Elementary, we had an HVAC project where we provided cooling units in the classrooms, which are shown on the left. And then we provided some condensing units up on the roof, and then we provided cooling in the cafeteria and gym.
Chris, there's another blank slide.
The next one was Jefferson. So similar to Washington at Jefferson, we provided cooling units in all the classrooms in addition to the cafeteria and the gymnasium. Whitman Middle School, we provided, we changed all the univents for heating and cooling in the classrooms. And then we provided, that's on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, we added rooftop units in addition to rooftop chillers to provide chilling or chilled air to the school. Wauwatosa East High School, we updated two areas. The art space is what you're looking at right now. The art studio are the two pictures on the left. And then we provided ADA access around the space, which is the picture on the right. We provided a ramp. We modified the corridor. We added a ramp and updated the stairs to provide access from around the space into the art space, and then around the art space into the tech ed space. And then I believe the next two photos are the wood shop and the tech ed space, where the picture on the left is showing the shop area where we've added. We took down the exterior existing curtain wall system, which was half of that, and then we made it all glass on the outside to provide natural light, daylight into the system or into the area. And then the picture on the right is the added classroom right off of the tech ed space. That should be it. One of the pictures that we skipped, there was an update done to Madison Elementary. So similar to Whitman Middle School, at Madison, we changed out the univents at the school, and then we provided rooftop units and chilled air to the school also.
All right,
And
thank you.
Yep.
Part of our presentation, I'm going to introduce Chad Bathke, who I believe is still with us tonight, with Chris Coggins again. And we're actually going to go over a high-level overview of the budget and where we are at currently with the referendum. So I will move. All right. Let me share the screen here again. And this is going to obviously appear there's a lot of information on here, and we're not going to go through every single number. However, high level, the referendums are in a very good place. We are under budget, which is a good thing. So that allows us to continue to do referendum work that we had planned, as well as continue to do the things that would have been alternates for those projects starting now into the next summer. Chad Bathke and Chris, if you want to take over, you can lead us through this the budget overview.
Great, thanks, Melissa, and good evening, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, Chad Bathke with VJS Construction Services. As Melissa had stated, we're in a good place from a budget standpoint. Lincoln, Underwood, and CIP1 have all been updated, and we have netted out all of the additional fees and owner purchases with Melissa. So those numbers on this cumulative balance sheet have been, you can see that they've been changed since previous versions, and they have been updated to actuals that Melissa has worked with us providing. We've also updated all the income down below, which is where she is, and these projects right now are all showing balanced amounts. So that's for Lincoln, Underwood, and CIP1. For Wilson and McKinley, like we did for Lincoln and Underwood, we are carrying all of our allowances under the additional fees and owner purchases. And as Melissa closes out, or as the district closes out those amounts, we will be updating those on this cumulative sheet to keep current when that's applicable. For CIP2, and just to note, we do have contingency values in Wilson and McKinley. For Wilson, we have $662,000 contingency remaining. And for McKinley, we have a $993,000 contingency remaining. So those projects are all bid out, bought out, subcontractors are scoped. So those are very healthy contingencies at this point in time. And knowing that we've got the renovation portion of Wilson complete, that's also usually where more of the contingency dollars are needed. So we're in a really good place, and those are healthy contingencies. For CIP2, that work is also pretty much completed and closed out. We did have, under the additional fees and owner purchases, we do have the locker room portion in here and the site improvement at East High School. Those were not VJS projects, but those have been added to the additional fees and owner purchases portions of those jobs. CIP3, you can see, is similar to how we tracked CIP1 and 2. We just have a lump sum dollar amount that we're carrying. And once those projects are actually bid out, bought out, and scoped, we will break out the additional fees and owner purchases, put those below, and then start tracking that project accordingly. So right now, that's just a lump sum value until we get all of the scopes and those projects bought out and completely defined. So just in summary, down at the lower right, you can see that we're still netting out to the overall referendum dollar amount of $124,900. We do show on this statement, we show $3.8 million of interest earnings applied to this. And then you can see that down in the lower right again, for Wilson, the Wilson STEM contingency of $662,000, the McKinley contingency of $993,000. And then we do have an unallocated right now amount of $900,000, in essence, contingency for the CIP3 portion. Totaling all of those unallocated dollars, that's $2.5 million. Some of that we're going to need for unforeseens and for scope changes for the work that we still have to complete, but that's a very, very healthy place to be from a budget standpoint. So all good news there.
All right, thank you, Chad. And with that, any questions?
And Melissa, I guess I've got a quick question, and not necessarily what you presented, because I mean it's great. It's love to see it on budget, on time, all those things. Walk through Lincoln with Miss Miner. We took a little social distance tour, and is incredible. So thank you to everybody who has pitched in on all these buildings, and to the community for taking a chance on us. I hope that in the coming months that people will be able to go see these things for themselves. I know the Journal Sentinel did a good job of doing a little photo tour of it, but yeah, once you see it for yourself, it's a wow factor. The question I've got is related to the aquatic center. I know I think the timing for that was around now or December for when that was, I think, slated to be complete. Do you know if there's like an updated timeline for that?
Yep, so the Aquatic Center, we do have an updated timeline. The locker rooms actually are turned over tomorrow to the school. So those are complete. And the pool is just being filled now. And we are scheduled to be wrapped up by the end of next month. It is delayed due to some unforeseen with COVID and other related things with supply chain procurement. We have been in communication with the donor for that project, as well as district administrators to let them know what the updated timeline is.
Great, that's great news. Thank you.
Awesome. Other comments and questions from the board? Any of our students have any questions or comments? Okay. Any community comments on this item?
No hands raised.
Okay. Thank you all so much for your work. This has been a lot of great work for a long time. And I echo Sean's thanks to the community for your support in voting for this. It is so neat to drive past the schools and to kind of see the progress being made now on McKinley and Wilson. And it just kind of the transformation of these spaces is really, really exciting. So thank you all so much for your work, for all the teachers and the staff who've given suggestions on design, the architects, the folks who are keeping everybody safe while building this to keep these on time and amazingly kind of on budget in the midst of all this. Kudos to you and thank you so much. Melissa, a final big thank you.
Thank you.
You've been helping guide us through this with Dr. Ertl. Really appreciate your incredible work.
No, thank you for the opportunity. It has been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Not done yet.
I think Dr. Earl said you're not done quite yet. Awesome. We are going to move into the Wisconsin Association of School Boards delegate. The school board has named board member Mike Meyer as the school district's representative for the WSD 2021 Delegate Assembly to be held on January 19th, 2021, all virtual this year. A big thank you to Mr. Meyer, who's stepping in, and Mr. Rolland, who's filled that role in years past. I appreciate, Mr. Meyer, your willingness in the midst of this to take this on. Lots of things happening around the state, and so your engagement with this and the time given to it to represent the Wauwatosa School District is greatly appreciated. And Mr. Rolland is greatly appreciated.
Well, we will not have
an initiative to pass a motion from the floor, as Mr. Rowland brilliantly organized a couple of years ago. So, but we'll do the job, but nobody can compare to what Sean did.
Mr. Meyer, never say never.
That's right.
We got time to come up with something.
Yeah.
Again, thank you very much. Final call for public comment on any non-agenda items this evening. Jamie, do we have anybody virtually?
No hands raised.
Mr. McCloof?
Joe McCloof, 772 North 116th Street. A couple quick points. Thoughts to what occurred at Mayfair Mall this past Friday. Thoughts and prayers to all that were affected by that. Hopefully there weren't any of our TOSA students that were actually victims of that. Very glad to hear that the shooter was not from TOSA district. I do know, however, that there were TOSA students that were in the mall in the vicinity of the area that shooting took place. Some of which have been traumatized, and thoughts are with them as well. One of those things that, unfortunately, if they've been in school where they belonged, that they may not have been there, but that's neither here or there. Also, point of order for the board. The executive meeting that was held prior to this meeting was held in violation of Wisconsin open meeting laws. Wisconsin statutes prohibit the conduction of a closed meeting prior to an open meeting. All closed meetings must be conducted after an open meeting and must be announced during the open meeting that they are to be conducted. Therefore, the vote that was taken during this meeting as a result of that closed meeting is also invalid. Continuation along those lines will be subject to prosecution by Wisconsin open meetings laws. That cannot take place. So just a point for the board, they will need to make some corrections to that matter.
Point of information, we opened in open session and voted to move into closed session and then resumed.
Open to close, open again as well either. By statute.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate your thoughtful comments as always. Okay. It is 9:51 p.m. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Sharon can have it.
Who was that?
Give it to Sharon.
Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Mr. Dillman?
Yes.
Ms. Fraley?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Ms. Mufeld?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Dr. Jessica Banger?
Yes. Thank you all again this evening and for all of your work during the meeting, all of your continued commitment to advocating for kids and the teachers and the staff in TOSA schools. I appreciate members of the community. Thank you all for all that you're doing. I know it's been a challenging year, but we are working and continuing to, I think, strive to get through this together in almost all cases. Thank you very much. Have a great night.